let's restart. Maybe we could adjust the lighting of the room. Is this better? Okay. Well, somewhat, this slide is a summary of what we have said. The importance that competition that has in different factors, where the logistics factor ensures benefits in presentation to the markets, products or services. But this, we can go even further because some think that some products have a greater capacity in logistics that in the long term to be competitive. This, of course, is very relative, but what is really important is that we can understand that the economical answer, the entrepreneurial and the strategic answers find in logistics a fundamental factor that the product at the right service is in the adequate quantity and place and adequate quantities also. And this solves the problems of logistics problems, which is the how, the shape, and the quantity in safety mode. The question that it's placed afterwards and taking into account what Mr. Porter said is to understand that logistics can, when we are in the market in which there is a competition between suppliers, new products and new companies, logistics can ensure scale in production, in the purchase of materials and a success in delivering materials and services. Just a footnote, Mr. Porter started one of the biggest American consultancy enterprises of strategic consultancy and strategic management that still exists more or less. Do you know why? Because it went bankrupt. It has an insolvency process because it has debts superior to $50 million. So I think that's the figure, but more or less. What this means is that economy and reality is much faster and demanding than the theory, and that even the best teacher, if it is not adequate to time and the context with constant analysis, SWOT analysis to its positioning, it can go almost crazy. And that's why Mr. Porter let others take care of his business. And this is important because it brings me the perspective of highlighting that the competitive advantages that we spoke about before and that are here imply a constant attention to key indicators, to the different types of indicators, because we have profitability, performance, efficiency, a globalized economy in which the movement of goods is very important, even for the pre-production phase or the production phase or post-production phase. Logistical indicators are now a core factor for the success of a product or of a service, or for the success of different products and services of a company, a sector, or an economical activity. And now let's try and reflect about this. When we are speaking about globalized economies, this doesn't mean that we will not find economies that are within levels of integration that are bigger or smaller. Of course, that in the European space, it's very important to speak about Europe. The European space per se. It's an economical space that's crucial for us, Portuguese people, and for a great part of other countries of the European Union, right? What is the weight of European Union in our commercial exchange? What do you think? 90%? It's not 90, but it's not that far from that. 70? Yeah, about 70%. Because Angola and the United States have grown a lot. The United States are still growing. The Angola has stopped. But this is an important subject. This subject of strategic terms and of the logistics serving strategy is the most important thing in most of you that are interested in the transport sector. What must be regarded in the ability of connecting ourselves to Europe to export and sell our products? What are the factors that must be regarded and the critical factors for success in the logistics component? Where must the public interest and private interest be focused? Someone is trying to say something. Who? What should we regard? And in the bar, we are speaking about these small matters. We have the dematerialization of processes. What must we assure? One of the things is the dematerialization of processes and creating rules or standards to all the European space where the goods are circulating in, for example. Okay, same regulation and same administrative facilities in the info flow. But more than this, what does the Portuguese economy must ensure and assure? What are the political deciders must assure in the connection with Europe to sell with effectiveness our products? Feasibility. How can we ensure feasibility? Where are 70% of these goods to? Well, ports. No strikes on ports, for example. A question here for Paulo. We have 70% of goods. Let's think it's 70 that exit Portugal to the other European countries. And we are in the tip of Europe. To be able to create attraction to more cargo to exit on the maritime way and train by train can be a sustainability factor on the competition on the medium and long term. What do you think? Yes, it is. And why? Only with quantities. For us to be able to supply regular chain to have some feasibility. And what do they assure? That the unit price are lower, so more competitive, without putting at stake the factor time of deliverance, right? Another question. Not every question is for Paulo. Anyone can answer. When we are involved in the logistics chain in which the purchases for a great retailer, for a Marks and Spencer, for some other Euromarché, other European chains in which we are selling shoes or fruit, for example. The ability for us to have transportation modes that can take more quantity with the same success on preserving the product and the same success on the needed timing, is this important or not? What do you think? Go ahead. Of course it's important. Okay, so I could transpose or could transport 50 containers of fruit, of pear, for example, by sea versus by road. The price of pear in the markets and supermarkets in Sweden, Norway, and Germany can be competitive with fruit that comes from Chile, from Argentina, right? So transportation modes and the possibility that we have of choosing transportation modes that can reduce unit cost of logistics and that can be uh, reproduced in the price of offer at the market, it's a factor of sustainability of the competitive advantage of a supply chain, for example, of fruit. And it's not unthinkable to change transportation mode that are highly, that have a lot of costs, more than generating many particles of CO2, transfer from road to train and to sea. And this changes a lot of things because it's clear that it's not only a producer of power, 203, that will be able to ensure a daily routine or a daily line, or 3 times a week or 4 times a week of fruit destined to markets of the north. But Spain does it. In Spain, the product exits from Andalusia, fruit, pears. At the same time, it goes to the port of Algeciras, and the following day it's in Rotterdam, and then by road it comes to the center of Europe. And in 24 hours, this is made. In 48 hours. The state, the regulatory role of governments is to understand two things. How can they guide and foster the management of the supply chain that begins by thinking in the strategy of logistics in order that the producers can earn a lot more, finding a logistics operator that it's carrying all its cargo, because the ones who are competing with the competitors in Hamburg, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Copenhagen, it's not Tony that is producing in Torres Vedras or Miguel in Luís da Serra. Our competitors are the ones who are placing it in Spain, somewhere in Italy, or outside Europe even. But the factor of competitiveness of the chain of what it's called the sector of fruit, so-called sector of fruit, stands on the identification that I am only competitive when me, myself, logistically take a step. But to do so, I need Gustavo to take the same step and to share with me this adventure of finding a logistic advantage that is sustainable. Sometimes this is an advantage that is to be equal to our partner, our competitor that is in Italy or Spain, because they are closer to the market. They are closer. It's shorter their distance, and they have a bigger scale of production. So the management of supply chains, it's fundamental when we see that we need to have innovation and creativity. And how can we be creative in logistics? There you go. To be creative in logistics is not to find a new package. It can be, but it's to find a new way of thinking the logistics process. I think that I have a difficulty getting at the same time as the great manufacturers of Italy and Spain and center of Europe, because a kilo of fruit in Portugal, of apple, €2, let's imagine. That same apple in the Northern Europe countries can be sold at €10. And the logistic price does not have this value. But we are only able to get closer to it with quantity to have sea scales or train scales to answer this question. But this is the innovation of logistics. It has to do with good governance, good administration that comes from the governments, but of the management of each company also. Governance. We need to be able to develop factors of competitiveness that are set in a vision of logistics to be able to ensure mobility, flexibility, and diversification. Does this make sense to you? And this needs to be done in quantity, because except some limited products, the value is not made by the value of the product. Our main productions in quantity, tons in euros, and fortunately for us, are not of rare materials. It's not gold, right? It's not gold. It's cork. It's cork. We have 80% of the world production of cork. And now the question is, were we not obligated to find other uses for cork? Insulating material, shoes, clothes, bags, right? Not only corks for wine and champagne, right? That's not enough. So the question is the following one. How much of the percentage of cork that we have, about 80% of world production is transformed in Portugal. Is it 80% also? Do you believe in that? So there you have an opportunity. I'll give you an example. Where do you have more cork? In Alentejo or here in the north part? And where were the main factories of transformation of cork? In the north, right? We were spending money transforming the waste of cork that it's not used, or the second value used, but we are paying transport here. Is this defendable in logistics perspective? What do you think? Avoidable if possible. Of course, it's a waste. We are wasting time. We are carrying cork that it's not being used, that it will be rejected or used for second uses, for recycling uses. This must be done in places where we can avoid the cost of transportation. That's the unit price of the cost. If I can reduce 30% of the numbers of flights that is made every year in euros, this has money in it. But this is enough to transfer the located industries. But are the industries of cork 20 years from now will be the same that are today? Right? For us to be able to transform more of the cork that we produce, doesn't it make sense to think what our buyers can do abroad for us to earn added value? Because one of the problems that we have is the cost of what we are transporting without need to do so. This is a concern. Or of what we are transporting without any need for it, or in case of fruit, of what we export and it arrives at its destination in bad condition. When we are transporting fruit and 25% of the container is a loss, the client is not paying for losses. The losses are at the charge for the supplier. The logistic costs, let's imagine it costs 2,000 euros for 10 tons of fruit. It will be 20,000 euros for 7.5 tons of fruit. So are we winning or losing competitive advantages with our European competitors, or Chilean or Argentinian or South African? We're losing, of course. So these components are fundamental when we want to think that a supply chain is fundamental for the success of a logistic operation. We have a first framework where we have the entrepreneurial logistics phase. I will distribute the documentation because the colleagues who are abroad in Italy, Spain, and Greece, if I'm not mistaken, already have this information translated. But once again, exiting the slides, what we can understand is that in 2 centuries, we went from movement of goods in which the time factor was not determinant, into a model of circulation and movement of goods in which the time factor is not important. It's critical. More the time factor and the cost factor also. Because cost is not only the transport and stock cost, it's something more important, which is the cost of waste. Because out of the context a little bit now, we, Portuguese, have a bad or have a good relationship with waste. Because we are a very wasteful and we waste a lot as Portuguese. We were not blessed with a lot of intelligence, with a lot of work ability when we are in Portugal, but it gave us good weather and the best number of solar hours of Europe. We should be the leaders in solar panels in houses. Do you agree with me? Do you agree or not? We should be. We have the resource. We have more than everyone. It's a resource that it's very good for saving energy, and it's very positive for the environment, for our grandsons. It's a good indicator, but it's not enough. Okay, let's debate this. Just the sun, in fact, it's an important factor, but it's not enough. We need to have other factors taken into account. Okay, can we enjoy the sun without sun? Okay, it's a fundamental factor. It's not only important, it's the predominant factor. But there are others. I will tease you a little bit now. How many Portuguese, I'm included in it, have 3 cars at home and we don't have a solar panel? Does it have to do with money? Well, we buy a solar panel. Is it the economical factor that it's not insured here? What do you think? I'm teasing you. Regarding the solar panel, we have more viable alternatives and more environmentally friendly. Electrical heating, for example, is cheaper. Cheaper how? It's cheaper than when we are comparing for 5 years. If we have 10-year cycles, it's more expensive. Let's see this. If we are seeing a system of gas heating with photovoltaic included, it's not effective annually. For 4,000 to 5,000 euros a year, that's regarding electricity, we are not reaching that value. It's as simple as that. 5,000 euros in the solar system, it's about 5,000 euros. 2,000 euros a year. Well, but the math is not that. You have an investment of 5,000 euros. The equipment lasts for how long? 10 years. Okay, the annual investment is of 500 euros. And we need to pay diesel also. Because this is a combined system, only the solar system. This is not enough. Nowadays, there is a lot of activity capable of doing so. The winter months, we have no production of sun, but we have sun. But it's not enough. Okay, let's debate. Yeah, this is just my experience, right? My vision regarding this subject is that it's based on the following. A country can have a certain potential, can be strategy, geoposition, can be had to do with natural income of natural resources, can be human also, but it needs policies to be implemented to take advantage of the best of the potential. But many times, that's the case of Portugal, policies are not always looking at the optimization of that potential. That's why we have today restrictions to the development of certain type of policies, as the one you talked about green energies, or even for the economical development for exploring ore and iron here in the northern Portugal. So I do believe that companies, entrepreneurs are attentive to this reality, and they are doing everything they can to surpass this limits, and we need new policies and more policies. Okay, but Elio, the case that Carlos studied is his own case. To change if he didn't install in his house, if he had installed in 20 in his street or in the neighborhood, because the factor of scale buying would make a difference once again. When we were to buy 20 equipment for the street, instead of one installer, a plan of installing that would give work for 3 months for installers without material. Okay, Paulo? Currently, we had a player that was bought by the Chinese, which is EDP, that it's doing so. And I had that study, and it is positive to have a solar panel for expenditures with energy when I'm not home during the day. Refrigerator, some apparatus that are connected. And what they did was to distribute in mass, and the financial cost 30 euros a month, so I don't need to invest 2,000 euros that maybe I didn't have. Yes, the state has changed the law, and it has made it easier. There was no revolution, it made it easier only for small production, micro generation of energy. But in reality, we had companies with a bigger dimension that were able to regroup in a competitive price. Okay, Paulo, Carlos, Hélio, everyone. Let's return to waste. And waste, we have a regular entity that is changing laws. We have the main player of the energy business, and based on electrical energy that is within the other ways of energy also, leading, trying to lead to the most recent technological innovation in terms of mass usage. This means what? That the potential is there already. It took us 10, 15 years to get there. But 7 years ago, I bought a new house in a street that has. It should be easy to reach an agreement that each building has no more than six, eight tenants, and it was not mandatory to put solar panels there. And this is in Lisbon, where the solar incidence is very high, quite near Tejo, 2 minutes from the water line. And there it is not mandatory. So it's important to understand that we are wasting, and all wastes are the handicap to the competitive strategies. More than this, the logistic factor, when we don't think of it as a support tool for strategy, but as a process of uh, setting a base and success for the strategy. It brings solutions when we have a scale buy of the installation service, of the maintenance service that needs to be associated with it, of upgrade services. So, and how can we fight waste? When we have this vision, the vision that we said of the client, we need to think also the supplier of the supplier. So the qualification is using a lot of this, and of management of the supply chain lives from this to identify, to map waste. This comes from the lean management logic to fight waste. And waste is here. We are not attentive to them. We have 30 buildings there with 8 floors, and from those 30, maybe not 30, maybe 20 or 25, there are 4 or 5 that have solar panels. And I criticize myself as an owner. What I should do is to have a meeting to promote an association of buildings, people who live in the neighborhood, asking them, why aren't we speaking with IDP, with service providers to make a study to install solar panels? Why not? I should do this, but that's another important matter. It has nothing to do with logistics. This has to do with drivers. I don't know how our partners who are out there in other countries are, but we love to be driven and not driving. And we love to be at peace, be quiet. And this brings costs. When we bring this to companies and to the universe of companies and enterprises, and this universe of regions, I love to use this expression. Europe of the 80s and 90s was born not as an Europe of countries, but regions, because this was a way of fighting and reinforce the will, the political will of the European Constitution, which is to bring peace to Europe, because Europe came into war processes by excessive national and imperial substantiations. Regions could be the best way to be opposite to this. Great part of the entrepreneurial success of peripheral countries of medium or low dimension of the European Union, and within the European Union connecting with the other economical regions of the world, comes from strategies. I will repeat this term today and tomorrow. Cooperative logistics and logic. It's not made by the company A on the X region. It is made by the company A in the region A with the other companies B, C, D, E, F from the A region also. And the role of the state is to regulate and foster the role of entrepreneurs, anticipating to the state and to make them be obligated to do something, because states of Southern Europe, which is the one that I know best, are by nature anemic and lazy. And so it is our obligation, because it hurts, to have a contrary movement for demanding. It's important for logistics also, and it's a role of logistics and from the management of the supply chain, logistic technicians, an intense pressure to identify what are the constraint factors and the bottleneck factors in all process. And that's a fundamental question. Because if we don't understand this relationship, this triangle of globalization, we, logistic technicians or elements of management of the supply chain, we will have a lot of difficulties. And now we can speak about specific cases in which we need to make this question, the entrepreneurial world and the sectors of each country and of each region and of which sector. What are they looking for? They're looking for competitive advantages, either by quality, by difference, prices, not cheaper, but at least sustainable with the competitors. Waste and logistical inadequacy can have a lot of origins, can be internal origins in the sense of each company or each region that is not studying their weak points and are not overcoming them, creating a list of strategy objectives that result from the balanced scorecard and from goals and initiatives, right? And we need to drive it. Or it's not in a company, but the region is not doing so. Or on the contrary, it's the national governance and administration that it's forgetting about it. But we as companies, are we doing it? Each company, are we doing? Each region, are we doing it? So in order to give you some food for thought, I would like to give you the first case, the first and the main case. Here you have the sheet. Here you have a proposal of guided reading that I want to give it to you, in which find a positive example. And I would like to ask you to read the process and please identify what I suggest in the guided reading, the set of problems that was identified by the entities here, a producer of a sector of paper and a logistical operator, which were the areas in the logic of 5M in terms of management, materials, man, machines, and methods that needed to be changed, the so-called 5Ms of management. If there is a SWOT analysis regarding the subject of strategy and the trading of that product, and notice clearly the critical factors that brought us to the change and initiative for that change of logistics solution that goes with deep transformation in management, equipment, and transport and logistic processes. Please read carefully. I will give you about 30 minutes, if you will, for that analysis, okay? The first analysis, because we will return to this, okay? You can just debate this among yourselves peacefully and ask me what you think you should ask me. For those who are in other countries, in Greece, Italy, and Spain, if I'm not mistaken, this is translated. I would like to ask you some reflection with another suggestion. Can you write or intervene telling questions that you have lived in your countries? Okay, let's do it. 30 minutes. 30 minutes, as we say in Portugal, 30 minutes like Benfica. Well, 15 minutes is enough. Okay, 15 minutes. No, 30.
almost there? Are you finishing? The finals are a work in progress, as we usually say. So, how are things? Can we begin? Okay, so who goes first? Ask for the microphone. Do not forget, ask for the microphone. Okay. Carlos will begin. I'm starting with the point where I identify the problem of this solution that was found. Creating this equation of what we see in the roads, we usually see lots of problems in our roads, and I think that the viability of this transportation system can be an obstacle. How viability? Namely, regarding maintenance plans, some things needed to be more proportional to this complexity, I believe. And also, when it comes to cargo moving transport in Porto and in the streets, in the warehouse as well. So in terms of maintenance, there's no history. And I think that this can be a problem as well. So the first problem here, that is the maintenance of this system. The second, that is the question of the circulation. Yes. And you're talking about a short path here. What happens here is that the road transport in Europe is only dislocated to the port. Sorry, I might have interpreted this wrongly. In the first point, it says that we have to identify the problem or set of problems that the solution tried to find. So Carlos is way ahead. He's contrasting the problem after the solution. He's pointing out the weak point of the solution here. So my problem here that I identified is the need to find a transport system with a lower cost, and that should be more efficient to transport the paper from the starting point to the terminal. Here we have to find a solution that is more accessible with a lower cost by the unity. So this is the main problem here. There's another problem that they present here. I don't know if anyone else picked up on it. Exactly. They anticipate the reinforcement of the constraints in European roads, and so they're trying to anticipate with a strategic vision, with a strategic logistics. They're trying to find a solution that is multimodal, and that not only immediately satisfies a lower cost, a lower transport cost, but also anticipates a solution regarding the constraints of road circulation. And as you know, in some European countries, and more countries are going to do it, the trucks transport is going to be subjected to extra taxes. What does this represent? This tax on the kilometers that were traveled. How does it affect the exportations? We are here. This is Europe. It's very poorly done, but this is Europe. I had to put it in flames to represent Europe, and it's not. We're here in this little piece, and our customers are here, 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 here. But the problem of problems is that we also have our competitors in these spots or close to them. So if taxes are going to be applied at the kilometers travel, who will have more difficulties? We, because the kilometers are the kilometers, and of course there's no going against it. So there's another purpose, that is to avoid these taxes that are going to be applied to the circulation in European roads. But here in this text, there are several solutions that might avoid several problems. But here, to go against the problem, they found two solutions, right? What was the first solution? Pass the microphone to Elio, to Rui. Let's all speak here. They found a multimodal solution with the transport by articulated truck and then by ship. So what we found here is a solution that does two things. We're here going to speak in terms of a management tool when we are facing one or several problems that bring us to the 5 M's. What are the 5 M's? I'm going to erase this here and we'll be back to it, or tomorrow maybe. First, machine, management, man, method, and materials. Infrastructure, whatever you want, with wider or less wider translations. When we look at this, we identify that the management identified two problems: costs and what's the other one? And quantity, and they're both linked here. Plus the question that is the viability of the solution. Does it make sense? There's going to be, in terms of management, we identified this question of the viability. And how are they going to intervene here? In the machine, they intervene in the machine factor with new machines. But this affects the methods of work. We have to find new methods. And for this, we also have to train the workforce that we have available. Does it make sense, the 5 M's? More notes that you might have. So the problem is identified here. Then, regarding the processes, the equipment, and the infrastructures, they were adequate both in the warehouse and in the port. So investments were done to qualify the infrastructure at the origin. If we had here, it would be the company who worked with a direct supplier to reach another supplier, that is the port, to then reach the clients. Is that okay? See how this is indeed a collaborative logistic where we have several agents that not only take the position of client and of supplier, but have also the role of partners. Other points that you might have noticed. The processes that are going to have to change, as we highlighted, do they involve only one company, or do they involve several agents, several suppliers? We're working here regarding articulate design, collaboration. So now I'm going to ask you, is that innovation or no? What do you say? It's not. It's not exactly an innovation, but it's a more efficient usage of the resources that we have. But it is somehow innovation. It's different. Well, entrepreneurial innovation is not about discovering powder. It's the creation of a new service. It's innovation. Yes, the service is new. Then it's innovation. But the tools, well, let's see something. When someone discovered that it could make a dough with with nuts and with regular fresh fruit, with cherry, with pumpkin, we made a classic Portuguese cake, boloré, with crystallized fruit. And so all the people who were eating it separately just joined all these elements and created this cake. Here in Portugal, we have this idea that the Portuguese stew is only Portuguese. No, they do the same in Spanish and in French. I think ours is the best, but even here in Portugal, there's difference. For example, in the north, we don't use specific sausages that people tend to use in the southern parts of Portugal, but each region is innovating because they're developing new palettes and new skills. In this case, we have entrepreneurial innovation because it changes the use of machines with a strategic vision and a work method that is completely new and is going to affect the cost structure, isn't it? Do you agree? Speak into the microphone, please. We could say that it is. Okay. More. Thank you, Diogo. I would now like you to tell me if there was an analysis of the operational context of this business. Was this analysis done? Can you tell me, based on the text, if this analysis was made? Elio, take the microphone. Please speak. Identified in the forces a few things that we spoke about, like the cargo per truck, the lowering of fuel consumption, and a higher adaptability of the nature of the cargo to the equipment. Very good. More. Carlos, did you want to say something? It's basically what Gustavo said. I think I also mentioned a lesser environmental impact that is very important, and a greater support frequency that is not always guaranteed. Yes, the viability of this solution, is it lesser or bigger than the actual viability or the previous viability? Yes, it's bigger, it's better, because we have a shorter road path. The maritime operation is quite stable. And when we're talking about the sector of paper, for example, here, we're talking about a sector that has quite a regular consumption and that is programmed at a distance. We can't just consume 200 rolls of papers until tomorrow. So we buy them to make sure that they're there at a given day, given the process of production. And so there can be some deadlines that are quite short for the chain of production. The weaker points have already been mentioned. In the weaker points, I spoke about the will investment as well. So it's an investment that is good for a medium long term, but of course this operation is done for the scale, of course. But there's one question here. There are other investments that can be done with the same logic, because what are the main productions, the clusters of the Portuguese economy have a lot to do with the road circulation, because we know that the relationship between transport and unitary cost of a cargo by ship, by road, or by railway is absolutely more favorable for ships and then for railways. When we compete in Europe, I'm just going to turn on the light. the transport, the river transport in Europe, I don't know if you're aware of this data, but the river transport here in Europe is, or is it not, determinant? Are you aware of this? In Central Europe, Germany, France, Holland, Netherlands, Czech Republic, it has a great importance. I don't have exact numbers, but it might be around 50% of the whole cargo transported by river. So the earlier our transport unit, our transport supports, that can be a container or just one unity, might be adapted and to river transport, it's a competitive advantage. Just to give the contribution of Vasilis here, in his opinion, the size of the trucks and the travel time, as well as the quantity of fuel that is used to travel, combined with a road journey that is more efficient, taking into account the cargo and whether the cargo is more viable or not, profitable or not, the fuel cost beside the size of the truck is something that has to be taken into account as well when we're thinking about the different ways and the different transport modes. We have to think that to transfer a road transport of long distance to short distance, well, a road transport can be thousands of kilometers and it can be reduced to tens of kilometers. So we're here taking away from the time in the road, and there's a lower risk of accidents here. In terms of environmental risk, that is the emission of CO2 of dioxide that is created by road transport, is drastically diminished when we transfer to maritime transport. But to have access to maritime transport, it's important to have logistic requisites regarding quantity and dimension of the product that is being transported. There are also solutions. When there is neither dimension nor quantity, what we have to do, that is us and the logistic operators, the maritime traffic operators, is trying to find solutions that are shared and that find in entrepreneurial associations and regional associations elements of dialogue that are very important to change that scale. So we can have a scale not of a commodity, but we can obtain the scale with the origin of 5, 6, 7 commodities, but in a given region that might be compatible, or that might design technical solutions in terms of transport units that will not interfere with the transport safety. So, Vasils, I think we understood your point quite well. More factors here. More factors. I'd like to highlight here something. So what are the critical factors of success? Which critical factors of success do you find in this text? The critical factors of success that I identified were the need to find the lack of accidents, so in roads and in cargo areas, the efficiency of the maritime terminals, so it's quite critical, and the question that is critical to me is definitely control of the horizontal control of the trace. And I'm here anticipating a problem. We're talking about very long trains here, very long vehicles, and if they're not specific ways to go around them, there might be some problems here. So regarding road safety, the lack of accidents, and the efficiency of the maritime terminal. We can do this journey all night long. So these are factors of mitigation of the problem, as well as the maintenance that Carlos mentioned. That is one of the problem. Mitigation is to find a maintenance plan that would be programmed and not reactive for this process. In terms of road safety, there's also an opportunity because these data are going to decrease, and I don't know what Hui is saying here is here given the size of the routes. We went from all to small routes when we were going from small routes to larger routes for some in Europe. So great part of it to Finland also probably. So maybe there's less truck are needed to do this transport. You manage two things here, that the truck that is used in the local route is bigger. Obviously, there's a greater pressure factor, but this factor can be mitigated with a good signalization and with other timetables that do not expose the truck to the pressure of the road circulation. Another critical factor would be in terms of the port, these regular routes, to make sure that there are no constraints in the port, because it is fundamental that after some time they should be accessible. Here, the problem is to really apply the solutions to this problem to paper paste. Yeah, there are some constraints regarding the drought, of course, the nature factor. Take the microphone. One of the constraints that I put down was
the port adaptation to receive more cargo, because I was afraid that regarding the drought, it didn't have the ability to receive those ships. Okay, but regarding the drought of the ships, they will not be bigger. The ships are the same. The reception at the port will be different. But does the port have the agility? But this is inland, this has nothing to do with the sea. The structure, the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure of the inland port to answer the ability of receiving those units, because the ship is the same. What happens is that the ship should take 48 hours to be supplied, and now it will 24 or 50% less, because the flow is smaller. I described that also. The agility of the port must be bigger also, but it has nothing to do with the drought. The trainee which was online agreed, but he said also the question of the LNG, even for vehicles on the road, this is important to consider logistically. Yes, it is a great focus. Okay, more focus points. To thank Vasily for his cooperation, and please tell us more. As an opportunity here, I believe that there is a creation of creating a dedicated way for these vehicles of paper transport from Lourosa, because we have Soporcel and Selvi. We have two companies of paper, and if the municipality in the government create a port area, which is the roundabout before getting to the bridge. It has a lane that surpasses, that has nothing to do with signaling, horizontal signaling, to make it easier for the transport. Well, where you are, what do you think? You are here in Porto Leixões. Well, in Leixões we have this problem, and we did exactly that. We have a lane for cargo, and this solution makes every sense because it reinforces the capacity of the port to associate itself with economy. If you are seeing up to what point the shared reflection of problems allows to find in logistics factors of competitive advantage. And to me, even more interesting is that regarding logistics and of the strategic vision of business and of supply chains is sustainability on the short, medium, and long term. And sustainability has to do with the survival, the capacity of the planet Earth to generate resources and renew itself. And we have a problem, which is we live in a society and in a global economy that is set on the continuous growth. It has a logic of mouth. And there is a problem that some economists of London School of Economics are stating that Europe and most of the Western world, and sooner or later the rest of the countries of the other regions of the world, should think in logics of economy without growth. This is a clear provocation. There was a book that it's called Prosperity Without Growth. It is published in Portugal by, I don't know if Tinta da China or Companhia das Letras, one of those two publishers. And the subject of prosperity without growth puts at stake this exact subject. How does the 21st century can continue to be set in development models of social and political development, demanding logistic answers from the supply chains, not putting at stake efficiency, a good use of resources, and a focal center, the absolute reduction. Sorry, the microphone of the speaker just went out of battery. I will just trade it in and resume the translation. Sorry.
The main question, how the logistic and the knowledge of this supply chain can help us. This case can correspond to a need of a greater use of the resources and without causing too many losses and wastes. But beside the solution, we can have other solutions. Does someone want to talk, please? What other business sectors can we mention it besides the paper sector? Is there other businesses? Sorry, we have some problems with the 21st century technology. In the 19th century, of course, we didn't have these problems. Nor partially, nor not at all. We didn't have this kind of problem back then, of course. Did someone want to make a comment? What other areas here in Portugal could be involved in great-scale transport, such as the paper sector, to take advantage of these facilities that are being created in Europe regarding maritime transport? Other sectors, paper. What else? of course, cars, vehicles. It's difficult for me to see that. Why is out to Europe in Setúbal? Why do you think? Because most of the production line of Auto Europa goes to the United States. And so Sines and Setúbal are the best ports to transport it. And we have other things, for example, fruit. Instead of going through the roads, couldn't it go by ship as they do in Spain? For example, some of them take greater distance to reach Rotterdam when they could get there much faster if they left from Lisbon or Sintra, for example. Maersk, for example, has a daily line from Rotterdam to the city in question. So, of course, here we're talking about Maritz because of the exploration that it does of the port. We have to consider who we have to challenge and who we have to talk to say, I must have the same solutions as the Spanish producers have, otherwise I'm losing in competitiveness. And it also works in other markets besides fruit. Here, the fruit market, this is a sector with history. Did you know who was the greatest supplier of oranges to England in the 19th century? Do you know who it was? In the 19th century, one of the problems was how to preserve the fruit, because the journey would last 2, 3, sometimes a bit more days, and when the fruit got there, most of the time it was rotten. Ice hadn't been introduced back then in the preserving the fruit during transportation from Europe to England. And so where do we have oranges here? Right here in the south. And the greatest producer here was the Azores until the 50s, 60s, 70s. The Azores were almost an economy of orange, like it is nowadays of milk. The problem is when the Spanish started to use their competitive advantage and have a greater advantage, because the Azores are very close to England, and so the fruit would reach England with a great quality, and so it was much easier to have an advantage here. But when the ice came along, of course, the quantities were much more favorable for Spain, and that's when Azores started losing some of the business. The Azores usually made complaints because they wanted a good port to be able to export the orange and other vegetables as well, but mostly oranges that had to leave for London. So these questions were also important in the 19th century. That was the geographical advantage that corresponded to a business opportunity. When logistics evolved through machines, through the ability to have ice, in this case in the containers, for the fruit to be transported, the competitive advantage of Azores disappeared because they no longer had that distance advantage. So we have the fruit that is closest to the consumer, to the direct consumer. But since we didn't have the greatest domain of the logistic system as our Spanish competitors did, we had a disadvantage. Our fruit arrives at not such a competitive cost. Something else that you want to highlight in this case? No? Gustavo? These little buttons are quite complicated. So we've been talking about the reformulation of the port to be able to work with this kind of trucks. In this case, there should be changes as well in terms of logistics to be able to load the boats. No, in the reception area, in the port, and the closest area to the port. But not in the pier area, it's not such a big necessity. In the area of the beach, for example, we could make some changes. I think that paper comes in containers. There are special containers designed for the rolls, but I believe they're containers. What I would like to ask you is for you to gather the ideas that we exchanged here and to create a little text of half a page. Try to speak about the constraints, the problems that we saw, the solutions. Can you do that for tomorrow, please? I'm only here tomorrow, so if you can't for tomorrow, just give them to Joanna or bring them in a drive, and we'll try to get some feedback and some summaries of everything we've been doing here. To close this session here, and then we'll start with another point tomorrow, I'd like to highlight here in this slide the importance in the logistic process of planning. And I'd like for you to understand that the planning involves all these steps: do, deliver, supply, do, deliver, supply, and do. And it involves suppliers and their suppliers, our company, and of course the clients and their clients. We have a logistic here that is completely involved in the context, and here everything crosses with a great easiness, and it helps us to deal with many challenges. What have I done here? I'd like to mention that this logic is developed in a logistic model that is the SCORE, that is the Supply Chain Operations Reference, and that revolves around the integrated management of processes that is based on planning, on supply, on execution, on delivery, and on return, either documental or of the base of the transport or of return. So this is the basic model of logistics and in the 21st century in all the developed world. Besides, logistics is more and more a component of reverse logistics, and it can become a green logistics as well. That is a theme that is not present in this program yet, but we already mentioned it when we spoke about the resources and the growth possibilities. And we speak now about this necessity and this need to use all the resources that try to help us not forget any part of these processes. And this is where we're going to start tomorrow. I'd like to ask each one of you, and I'm going to pass you the microphone, and I'd like to ask you to highlight one idea of what we did this afternoon, something that you may want to highlight.
And I would like to ask you out there if you want to write something to us for our country, for our colleagues abroad. Gustavo, please. Well, a concept that it's new to me that made me think about the supply chain is a concept of cooperation, of collaborative and cooperation. This opens a lot of problems. This brings a lot of problems. It was quite interesting. Okay, Gustavo, thank you. Diogo, please. The introduction of a new concept given by you of green economy related with growth. The development without growth. That's something that you will search for. Okay, good one. Elio, introduction of the concept of lean logistics associated with lean manufacturing. Elio, very good. Carlos, please. The concept of the internationalization and globalization and how we integrate it. Rui, well, the same as Diogo, this prosperity without growth. This is quite interesting to me. More important than how can we produce? How do we produce? And this has to do with resources management and with the breakage in waste. Paulo, once again, I was about to speak about the cost waste, but we are all focused on this. This is good. Okay, thank you for being here, for your cooperation. This is new for everyone working in a distance. Any suggestion that you have, please tell me. And to thank also our colleagues who are abroad that please be here tomorrow, write more, please tell us more things, and Portuguese goodbye to you, okay? See you tomorrow and thank you.